All right, folks, hello and welcome back to online English class. Hope you guys are doing well today. Today we're going to continue the process of preparing for your exam, which is this Wednesday. But before we do that, I just want to quickly talk directly to the Honors English 4 folks. For the next 2 weeks, you should be focusing primarily on finishing your draft for your quarter 4 essay. Okay, that should be as near to perfect as you can possibly make it. All right, so check the title of the daily videos. If the title does not include H ENG 4, then you don't need to watch the video. But if it does, then you do. Okay, if only just to quickly check in like we're doing right now. Okay, just so that you can have heard the things that I need to you to have heard me say in these last couple weeks. Okay. If you have any questions about your draft, you can email me and I'll get back to you according to the urgency of your question. But you still need to connect on a daily basis with the office about your attendance. All right. So you guys can go on your merry way and work on your quarter 4 essays and the other things that you need to do as the year wraps up. All right, you AP folks, let's go ahead and jump into our work for the day. Okay, so this is an important day talking about the composition of your essay, looking at the body, all right, the heart of your essay, how you're going to support that head, okay, your thesis statement. All right, before we do that, let's quickly just run through these top of the week announcements. All right, so first of all, remember the exam's on Wednesday. Remember to leave a discussion grade a comment at the end of each video. Remember that you need to be working through actively the process of preparing for your exam. Remember that you need to have engaged with all of these prefatory documents made available by the College Board. And remember that from May 18th to 22nd, these 2 ongoing assignments will be due. Okay, so to sort of summarize the information at the back of the exam, or the sort of prefatory information, okay, the exam is on May 13th. It will begin at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We're in the Eastern Time Zone, so it will begin for us at 2 p.m. So be ready for that, 2 p.m. All right, you need to log in 30 minutes before the start time for your exam using your e-ticket. That e-ticket will be emailed to you 2 days prior to the exam's beginning. That is today, Monday. Okay, so be watching your email for that and make sure that you get that. All right. The timer will show 50 minutes. You'll have 45 minutes to read the question, to work on your response, and then 5 minutes to submit that response, okay? You'll need to have completed all of these tasks here. I won't read through each and every one of them. If you want to pause the video and look at it, you absolutely can. If you want to type your response in Microsoft Word or Google Doc, you can do that and then copy and paste that response into the text box available on the exam. You don't have to do that, but again, you can. Remember that you are permitted to have access to these outside resources, but that overuse of them will harm you more than it will help you. During the course of the 45 minutes of reading and writing, you need to be reading and writing almost that entire time, unbroken. Okay, this is not the time to take a brain break. It's not the time to work slowly and steadily. No, it's the time to blitzkrieg this prompt, all right, to read carefully, but read as efficiently, to write carefully, but to write as efficiently as you possibly can, okay? So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump back into the process of preparing for your exam. All right, so if you will, go ahead and return to your review guide, okay? The review guide that I've set up for you is right here. It looks like this, okay? It's a prose close analysis review guide. In our first couple review sessions, we talked specifically about what prose close analysis is, all right? Just a broad definition of what what it means to analyze prose. And then we talked about the content, the function of character, the function of setting, the function of structure, the function of narration and narrative voice, and the function of figurative language, all of which help develop meaning in a piece of literature. And the College Board wants to see you be able to explain the significance of in your essay, all right? But that's not the only portion of the exam. The exam also requires you to be able to write effective essays, okay? So even as you expand your understanding of the literary terminology that is relevant in the analysis of the meaning of a piece of literature, even as you do that, which you ought to be doing, All right, all of it, all of this content knowledge about the meaning, about various literary terms, none of it is useful to you unless you can construct using those tools an effective, coherent, logical reading of the meaning of a piece of text. Okay, so that begins with you understanding what the text says, just on a basic level. What is being impressed in this text, and then, right, how is this text developing that impression, and how can I describe how the author is using literary techniques in order to elicit that impression, or elicit this response in the reader's mind. Okay, so you can expand your understanding, but even as you do so, okay, to return to my original thought, you need to make sure that you are doing so within the context of a coherent essay. Those are the two big things that are evaluated in the exam. Your essay writing skills, which is an evaluation of your rationality, your ability to offer rational, meaningful opinions that interprets textual phenomena and says, here's why I know what it means, here's how I know, right? And also your ability to read literature. Both of those two things are evaluated in the exam, and you need to be excellent at both. All right, so the first area of composition that we talked about is thesis statements, and we defined what a thesis statement ought to look like in this form of writing. It should be a defensible claim about an interpretation of literature that responds and satisfies the requirements of the prompt, the task at hand. Okay, if you want to return to that lecture, you need to go back to that and understand that process better. You can go back to the lecture on Friday. Okay, today we're going to be talking about the body of your essay. Okay, the portion of your essay that supports and is in alignment with that central claim. Okay, so you can think of your thesis as the head of your essay that articulates the basis of your reading. All right, the central idea of your essay, and then the body is everything that supports that head. Okay, that works alongside it. Okay, so what do your body paragraphs need to look like? What do they need to do? Well, essentially, in an interpretive argument, all right, your claims, your supporting assertions in this form of writing need to affirm how portions of the text, right, portions of the text help or relate to or develop the impression that you have said the text makes as a whole. All right, so a good way to do that is to chunk the text chronologically or to chunk the text according to its uses of various literary devices. You can do either one. Okay, and in those body paragraphs, you need to structure, all right, a logical sequence of claims that work together to defend the overarching thesis. All right, that's called a line of reasoning. All right, and a line of reasoning needs to include both evidence and commentary. Commentary explains the relationship between your textual evidence, all right, the actual portions of the document, right, that you're quoting from. You're saying, hey, this is important. The commentary just explains why it's important, how it relates to the central claim. If you do that over and over again in each one of your body paragraphs, you start with an interpretive assertion that talks about how a portion of the text relates to the larger central meaning of the text, and then you take me to some text, right? You cite some textual evidence, and then you explain the significance of that textual evidence. Every body paragraph, all right? If you need to rewind that and hear me say that again, you should do it. But if you do that in every body paragraph, all right, and you have sufficient body paragraphs where you have analyzed the major movements of the text. You've thought about the beginning, the middle, and the end of the text in some respect. All right, then your essay will be logical. All right, as long as you're reading the words correctly. All right, your essay will be a reasonable and rational line of reasoning, and your reader will have to award you points for that. Now, in order to achieve the sophistication point, which we'll talk more about tomorrow, you're going to want to arrange that line of reasoning with transitions, with excellent writing. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. Okay. So let's talk about how this shows up in the scoring criteria. Okay, so the first scoring criteria, the first point for the prose analysis essay is your thesis. Okay, so you always want to make sure that either in the beginning of your essay or in the end of your essay that you arrive at a thesis statement that answers the prompt. Okay, the interpretive portion of the prompt. Okay, the middle section and the largest section of the scoring criteria is the relationship between your evidence, your commentary, and your central claim. Okay, if there is a logical relationship between those things, then your essay gets 4 points out of 4 points, which is to say, all of the assertions made in your thesis are defended with specific evidence from specific areas of the passage, all right, that help bear out the fact that what you are saying is true about the text is reflected in the text. Okay, if you can't support your interpretation of the text meaning with what's in the text, then your interpretation of the text is no good. Okay, it's wrong, it's erroneous, it's illogical. And then after you introduce that evidence, you don't just introduce the evidence. Some of you guys, this is your weakest point. You just introduce textual evidence and then you walk away. All right, you have to explain, unpack, and analyze how those pieces of text are developing that impression. Okay, and the more sophisticated analysis will talk about how the literary techniques used in those passages are developing the impression that you have said is being impressed in the text. If you do that, you get 4 points out of 4. If you do that, but you don't explain how all of your evidence supports your line of reasoning, which is to say your central claim, then you get 3 points. If your evidence is, if you only provide some evidence and some commentary, you get 2. If you provide weak general evidence that doesn't unpack a wide range of specific textual quotations. Hear me say all that. A wide range of specific textual quotations, but you're only generally referring to stuff that occurs in the passage. And your commentary merely summarizes the evidence instead of analyzes and explains that evidence, then you get 1 point. And if you don't do any of that, you just have a thesis statement and then you just kind of like repeat the thesis statement or summarize what happens in the passage, you're not offering evidence that supports your interpretive assertion, then you get 0 points. Okay, it makes a lot of sense, right? To put it simply, if your evidence and commentary, if your body paragraphs are thorough and offer a wide, well-developed interpretation of the textual phenomena in the passage, right? All the stuff that happens in the text, okay? If you talk about a wide range of these key pieces of text, and then you explain how that wide range of pieces of text from various sections of the text support your interpretive assertion, and you unpack the specific literary techniques that are in those quotations, then you get 4 out of 4. You have done prose close analysis exactly the way that it is intended to be done. You have done it reasonably. You have done it rightly in that sense. Okay? So let's look at an example, one example of how this looks, all right? And you can look up more examples on the AP College Board's website if you want to look at more examples of effective writing and also ineffective writing. You can look at samples from the 2018 exam. That's on the Hawthorne excerpt, all right, and also samples from the 2019 exam. All right, that's a different excerpt. So you go to question 2, you can look at the samples, all right, and then you can even read commentaries about those samples that explain why they got the score they got. Okay, so what I'm going to do is a little bit different. I'm going to look at one of your old passages from your progress check. This comes from progress check number 6, and it comes from an Edith Wharton novel called The Lamp, a short story called The Lamp of Psyche. All right. So in this passage, a newly remarried Delia Benson, all right, Corbett, looks back on her relationship with her first husband, okay, this man named Benson, okay, Mr. Benson. Read the passage carefully, then, in a well-written essay, analyze how the choices and actions Wharton assigns to Delia convey Delia's complex character. Okay, so in other words, she's going to have some kind of complex response to her old husband Benson. All right, and what we need to do is respond to the prompt with a thesis that presents an interpretation. All right, then select and use evidence to develop and support that line of reasoning, and then explain the relationship between the evidence and your thesis. In other words, establish a central claim, evidence that central claim with text, and then explain how the text connects to our thesis. All right, claim, evidence, commentary. Okay, so the text, which you already should have read, basically describes Delia Corbett, or the former Delia Benson. The fact that she had been a good wife to her first husband, all right, even though her husband was a bad man, right? A man that people around him referred to as a kind of a weak man. This implies that he was probably unfaithful, probably dealt with certain kinds of aspects of incontinence, maybe overindulgence in women, overindulgence in drink, overindulgence in other forms of material vices. Okay, and Delia, like a good wife from this period of time, instead of holding her husband accountable for these weaknesses, simply sort of turns a blind eye to them. All right, but increasingly throughout the course of her marriage, as Benson's behavior continues to kind of betray his wife Delia, and his behavior continues to sort of exert a kind of sense that Benson thinks that he is a privileged member of their marriage who isn't accountable morally, who doesn't need to be faithful, who doesn't need to care about his wife's ultimate values, right? He just doesn't care about what she wants, and simply, according to sort of standards of his time, just does what he wants and expects his wife to be unflaggingly faithful to him without holding him accountable for anything. Okay. And increasingly, Delia stops loving Benson, but she doesn't leave. She doesn't leave Benson. All right, and she's increasingly dissatisfied with the social custom of monogamous marriage in this context. Okay, so here we are with Wharton bashing on marriage again. You can tell she had a wonderful marriage life. All right, but her bashing on marriage obviously reflects a larger kind of phallocentrism in turn of the century culture and in Victorian culture more generally, that basically allowed men to be a certain sort of moral laxities, right? You could have a mistress if you were a certain sort of social class, and dalliances, and all of these things were sort of to be expected, but they were to be suffered completely by the wife. Okay, and this wife, right, Delia, begins the process of rejecting those social conventions. All right, so that's the dominant impression of the passage. And here's a student essay that articulates that very clearly in a central claim, and then defends that central claim with evidence that is then commented on. Okay, so let's look at the examples here. All right, so in the passage, the progression of Delia's thoughts concerning her ex-husband Benson are used by Wharton to reflect Delia's progression towards a desire for freedom and happiness, as well as a budding rejection of society's standards. Okay, so that's a nice open-ended interpretive claim, all right, that sort of introduces us to an interpretation of Delia's character, right? She increasingly, despite her outward faithfulness to Benson in their marriage, increasingly by the end of their marriage, as it began to sort of fall apart, she desired freedom. She desired her own personal form of happiness that Benson had completely rejected, as a husband ought not do, right? A husband probably should consider what makes his wife happy. All right. She begins to sort of take care of that herself and reject society's notion that she simply needs to forfeit all of her values sort of at the altar of faithfulness to her husband. Okay, so the first paragraph, right, introduces some textual evidence here, some direct references to the language of the text that are integrated in a larger sentence here. Delia is initially introduced as a laxly tolerant individual with regard to her husband's weaknesses. The narrator gives Delia's self-justification for this laxness in that she knew her own weaknesses and wished to receive a like mercy of tolerance herself. Okay, so again, the student here in this section of the student's paragraph is just offering textual evidence that begins to characterize Delia. But then the student shifts into commenting on the significance and the connection between this textual evidence and the larger interpretive assertion as she begins in this state of, right, sort of unhappy uh, 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 unhappy acceptance of her husband's moral laxness instead of holding him accountable like an adult ought to be. Okay, like a wife ought to hold her husband accountable. All right, she sort of just is portrayed as being indifferent. But that indifference, which is established in the beginning portion of the passage, begins to be developed, and it's not exactly indifference so much as it is hidden discontent, a sort of patient waiting for an opportunity to achieve the freedom and happiness that she longs for. Okay, so the second portion of the passage begins a shift in this perspective. She is not just characterized by the narrator as indifferent, but rather as one. Okay, in other words, to put it in the student's words, she is not indifferent or unconcerned with his actions, but rather resentful for not having a whip or its moral equivalent for to control him with, right? In other words, he is completely out of control, and she wants to hold him accountable. She wants to bring him to heel, but she cannot do this. All right, there is no. It's too abnormal. She desires control over her husband and his actions, just as she controlled her pet. However, this would not be socially proper, so she conceals this desire beneath a facade of indifference. Okay, so now we're starting to understand the nature of Delia's original seeming indifference a little more clearly. Okay, she can't act on it, so she hides behind indifference. All right, and finally, right, Delia, her attitude begins to be much more condemnatory to Benson. She is not sort of the laxly tolerant ideal wife that she seemed to be, that just indulges her husband's weaknesses because, boys will be boys, right? Rather, Delia holds Benson accountable for smudging the whiteness, for smudging the purity of her earlier illusions about marriage and love. She married Benson for love, right? And these socially constructed ideas about love and marriage are also subsequently deconstructed for Delia. All right, she, quote, tried to remind herself that she had married Benson for love, but as time revealed the falseness of this sentiment, she became, quote, well aware that this so-called love she had once entertained for him had nothing in common with the state of mind which words now represented to her. So some of you guys said that Delia still loves her husband. This is directly defied in the text, all right? So please read carefully. She does not love her husband anymore. The words I love you have nothing in common with the state of mind that she used to have in her previous relationship with her husband. Okay, so rather she wants to discard him. he is not the man that she thought he was. And very much like the fact that she bought a bunch of trivial garbage knickknacks with her money in her youth that she would, without a second thought, discard for the sake of her own happiness because her taste has changed, so too she wishes she could discard Benson, but she is incapable. Why? Because of the social convention of monogamous marriage and the fact that divorce is demonized in her society. Okay, so here is Wharton once again meditating on the sort of socially constructed notion of monogamous marriage, very similar to Ethan Frome. Okay, obviously Wharton not a huge fan of not having the opportunity to divorce a person whenever a person is no longer happy with them. Well, we would disagree on that point, but she does point to some larger trends about the injustices and immorality with which Delia and Benson's marriage was based on in the first place, and comments on that and sort of reflects that in her writing. Okay. So ultimately, what I'm trying to point out here, and what you should see in the body paragraphs here, is that each body paragraph connects logically back to the original thesis statement. Okay, the thesis statement makes an interpretive statement about Delia's thoughts concerning her ex-husband. All right, and those thoughts are complex. Why? Because, or her characterization is complex, as noted in the prompt, right? It's a complex character. So her complex character is complex in that throughout the course of the very long paragraph, what seems to be lax tolerance or indifference, like, I don't care, it's no big deal, actually is indeed, by the end of the paragraph, a big deal. All right, something that Delia reflects on and has thought about very hard, but she has no outlet, all right, to get out of this marriage, in which it would be. It seems that Benson has been unfaithful to her. It seems that Benson has not husbanded her well, and so her original notions about love and marriage have been destroyed by Benson, and this is something that she blames him for. He has smudged her sort of idealistic understanding of what it means to love and be in love. Okay, tainted her understanding of romance and what it means to love a man and be loved by a man. All right. So each aspect of these paragraphs are connected to analyzing that character development. Okay. This good reading, which is this is a good reading. In fact, it would receive 6 out of 6. All right. This is a good reading. This good reading starts with a solid understanding of what is in the passage. Some of you guys, I can tell, wrote these quickly, read these passages like as quickly as you could to kind of get through it. I, on the day of the exam, right, of course you will not do that. You need to have all of your mental faculties invested in the process of looking at what impression is being made in the text. Okay, and ultimately, when you have a clear understanding of that, you can offer a solid, rational interpretation, and then you can bear out that rational interpretation with evidence that is commented on in your paragraphs. Okay, so you want to make sure that you start with claims. All right, like for instance, Delia is initially introduced as such, and then expound on that claim. All right, unpack more of the evidence, and then come to some sort of conclusion in your commentary about what impression is being made and how that impression relates to your larger central claim, and then continue that process throughout each one of your body paragraphs. Okay, so this is a great example of a line of reasoning that is evidence-based, that has excellent commentary, and that is develops reasonable connections between the paragraphs themselves, okay, as they move toward a clearer understanding of this original central claim. Okay, that's all that I have for you today. Super vital portion of your essay is just knowing that your body paragraphs, of which you should have 3 to 4 in your prose analysis essay, should be all clearly connected to your thesis statement, your interpretive thesis statement, and they need to have textual evidence, right? Specific, direct references to the text, and then commentary that explains that text. If you all do that, you will all pass. All right. If you all do that, you will all pass this exam. All right. So I have nothing but confidence in you. Sorry, I understand this video is pretty lengthy. Okay. But ultimately, this is an important concept, and it's worth you sitting here and taking a look at it and reflecting on it consciously. Okay, if you want to spend more time with these kinds of things, you can look at the sample essays and the commentary on those sample essays. If not, if you feel like you've mastered this concept, then by all means, take a break. We'll reconvene tomorrow on Tuesday, and then we'll take that exam on Wednesday. Have a great day.